What is up, everybody? RandomRandomMan here, bringing you my lengthy review of Transformers: Age of Extinction, which stars Mark Wahlberg, Stanley Tucci, Kelsey Grammer, Nicola Peltz, and Jack Rayner, and is directed by Michael Bay. The plot follows struggling inventor Cade Yeager, played by Mark Wahlberg, and his daughter Tessa, played by Nicola Peltz, both caught in the midst of a government plan to execute all Transformers from planet Earth. In general, I am a fan of the Transformers, as when I was younger, I did watch some of the cartoons and even still have some of the toys. But then, of course, came Michael Bay with his rendition of the franchise, and love him or hate him, the man does have an eye for action, as 2007's Transformers was a welcome and entertainingly fun way of bringing the alien robots into live action, and for a new generation to enjoy while working as a standalone film. Then came 2009's Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen, as the main flaw for me was the writing, as it did not help that this flick mostly came off as a half-cooked homage to the animated Transformers movie from 1986, that one reigning superior with a similar plotline. But I also do not think that Revenge of the Fallen is an outright atrocious movie. Many have made it out to be like that, but I kept in mind that this was coming off the first flick in a similar fashion, but then again, this is a flawed movie. Next was 2011's Transformers: Dark of the Moon, and while it was a better film, it still retains some of the flaws that plagued the previous entries, and I'm probably biased to say this, but I think this entry has the best action in the franchise, as the final set piece was filmed and took place in my hometown, Chicago, Illinois, and it was really cool to see the downtown area getting blown up by Transformers. So yes, the live-action Transformers franchise has had a spotty history, with its flaws mainly coming from that all three of these movies have had the same plot, and each sequel was unnecessarily longer than the last. But the action and special effects have always been astonishing to watch. I legitimately went into this new entry with hopes in moderation, as there was a new cast and a plot with something at stake, as the Transformers are being killed off by the government. But I also did think this would be the final Transformers film initially, until I found out that this was the start of a new trilogy despite having the word Extinction in its title. And I also took into account of the franchise's history and reputation going into this new flick. How was it? Let's run down the whole thing. Mark Wahlberg was the best part about this movie, as he played an inventor, which is a role I did not think would work for him being a Mark Wahlberg, but he was able to pull it off in a nice fashion throughout. Despite having some nitpicky moments with his lines, I still thought that he was fine throughout, and is a capable action star, of course. Nicola Peltz as Wahlberg's daughter was clearly dolled up here to compensate for Megan Fox and Rosie Huntington-Whiteley not being here. And while Peltz delivered a terrible performance in her last movie, which was the absurdly disgraceful The Last Airbender from 2010, Peltz is actually a lot better here, and is not overly and in a stereotypical fashion portrayed as a whiny teenage girl, but I thought she was suitable for what the film was worth. With that being said, however, the rest of the human cast was questionable with their characters. Kelsey Grammer played the CIA agent who was out to eliminate all the Transformers, and I did not think he was significantly integrated into the plot enough to be the human villain that he was set up here. Comedian TJ Miller played Wahlberg's mechanic friend, and he delivered some of the most laughably bad dialogue in the first section of the movie. Then Stanley Tucci, who played yet another inventor, this time of the more sophisticated Transformers that were built to take down the other ones. Tucci was just ridiculously hammed up for comic relief, and I really like this guy as an actor, and he is introduced in a very weird fashion as almost like a fashion dude, but this time he's building Transformers. And in in the movie trailers that have been put out for this film, he had a line that he cheekily yelled, "Oh my God!" That pretty much summed up his character and his attitude. Finally, Jack Rayner plays Peltz's Irish boyfriend, and he went from being such a tough race car driver when he is introduced to becoming a wuss in the heat of battle. Overall, the human cast here was really not good besides the two main leads that were carrying the movie. Now on to the actual Transformers and plot. Peter Cullen voicing Autobot leader Optimus Prime is always a joy to hear and is quickly introduced to teaming up with Wahlberg, which does work. But my issue with Optimus is that he has just become more bloodthirsty as the franchises went on, and he slowly lost his protective and virtuous character. Bumblebee also makes a return here with the new Autobots, including the Commando Hound, voiced by John Goodman, Samurai Drift, voiced by Ken Watanabe, and Paratrooper Crosshairs, voiced by John DiMaggio. And for those of you who don't know who he is, he's actually the voices of Bender from Futurama and Jake the Dog from Adventure Time. Anyway, the newest Decepticon is Galvatron, who, from past Transformers lore, is actually Megatron 2.0. And Megatron was the main Decepticon from the past movies. But the real villain here was Lockdown, a bounty hunter who is neither an Autobot nor Decepticon, but helps the CIA take down the other Transformers for an artifact called the Seed, which would lead me to the plot. For the first section of this movie, I was really intrigued in what was happening with our new human cast and what was going down with the Transformers being hunted. But as soon as the CIA got involved with our lead characters, things soon started to fall apart. As we learned from the past installments, these movies are not good at telling stories, as the writing is all over the place, and actually got quite boring at times. The writer, Aaron Kruger, who has been writing these movies since Revenge of the Fallen, seems to not mend all the story elements together well enough to be engaging all the way through. And while I'm talking about the writing, the previously mentioned Seed is the artifact being fought over here, as there were other relics in the last three movies being at stake. But the Seed should have gotten a bigger focus if it was really that important, as it just came out of nowhere when it was introduced. The story is definitely one of the weaker aspects of the film. All that is left to talk about is the action and the location. The special effects here are always impressively crafted for the robots, and their movements and the other alien technology used here was actually kind of cool to see. But this time, I think they have been too inconsistently utilized throughout, and when seen in 3D, it's still fun to see them coming out at you, but there was some sequences with where the CGI seemed to have been uninteresting. One sequence took place on Lockdown's alien ship, and I think that is where most of the $210 million budget went to, as I thought that part was just unnecessary and was not really important to explore. The action itself was stable for the most part, but when it came time to fight in close quarters with both humans and Transformers, yeah, it was difficult to watch with a lot of moving parts at once. What did not help was that part of this film was shot again in Chicago, and it was just not astonishing to watch as the final battle of Chicago in Dark of the Moon. And speaking of a final battle, the finale here was shot in China. And frankly, after the section in Chicago that led up to the section in China, I just got really bored until the Dinobots came in. And yes, the Dinobots, as they were advertised here, look really cool. But I did not mention them beforehand with the other Transformers because they were a waste. They were just a waste here in the last 20 minutes. And they probably are going to come back in later entries as, yes, this is the start of a new trilogy once again with the other surviving robots. This film was shot well in China, however, and will definitely appeal to Chinese audiences from the way the country is filmed and the fact that famed actress Li Bingbing, a native of China, is actually a pretty prominent and likable supporting character here. Sadly, China was not used until the last hour of the film, which leads to the biggest issue with this flick, as it is way too long. Yes, everyone says how Michael Bay's movies have too much action or are they're too long, but this time it is absurd to have any movie, no less an action one, run at 2 hours and 45 minutes. The last theater experience I had that was up to this magnitude was The Wolf of Wall Street, and that was a whopping 3 hours total. But the difference here is that The Wolf of Wall Street was consistently interesting and hilarious throughout. And in Age of Extinction, it was unbearable when the majority of the movie was exposition that could have been cut out. At least a half hour of it should have been cut out from the film. This is also the fourth live-action Transformers movie, and director Michael Bay should have learned by now that these movies can be uncomfortable to sit through when presented like this. But no, he's the director. He can do whatever he wants. But then again, some of his methods don't come out very cleanly. That's the last thing I'll address here, as I should start wrapping up, actually, or else this review will be as long as the movie itself and will turn into a rant. My final thoughts on this movie are that I really did want to like this movie, as the two main leads were suitable and the visual effects and the action were still spectacular for the most part. But the lazy storytelling, the laughable supporting cast, and the exhaustingly long running time heavily held this movie back from being what it should be, an enjoyable time at the movies. There are more of these films coming, and there is no doubt that they will, as with this flick has already done, they will definitely be cash cows in their entirety. My final verdict for Transformers Age of Extinction is 2 out of 5 stars. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you later on the next movie review.